Okay, the kids are, in a nutshell, until now we basically spoke out a number of things that happen coming up till Mita. We mentioned about the near-death experiences. We tried to show the overlap between what people say. You know, everybody has their own, as they say, nusach, their way of saying it. But what you do is you take the common denominator of all what everybody said, and you take those and you compare it to what Chazal already told us thousands of years ago, whether it's from the Gemaras, whether it's from Zohar, and you see an incredible overlap. And that's the idea that we wanted to bring down. That was the main thing we brought down. And we spoke about Peshat Mita, at the time of death, different things that occur. Now, there's one important last nekuda I wanted to mention when we talk about what happens Peshat Mita. An interesting one, and it actually applies a little bit halacha l'maisa. What is that? That is the words of the Shla. The Shla says in Psachim and Daf Hey Amud Bet. Listen to this. He says like this. He brings from the Megillat Starim. The Megillat Starim brings from Hamekubal Agadol, Rav Yehuda Meshari. Rav Yehuda Meshari, not Sharbani. Rav Yehuda Meshari, that he was Mekabel from his Rabbi, V'Rabbi Mi-Rabbi, and this, like I said, is really a Halacha L'Maisa. It's not Baran Shulchan Aruch, but it's a thing. It's a Mi-Rabbi Mi-Rabbi. It says like this: Ki Satan Omed. This is his words. Ki Satan Omed al Yamina Adam be'et she'omed namut kedei l'Satano. At the time when a person is omed to die, this is very important to know this. A person is omed to die. He brings down a Kabbalah that the Satan very often might come and try to. He comes and he stands at the person's right side at the time when he's coming to be Mesaten. Ve'omer lo, and he says to him, Kfor be'elokei Yisrael. He tells him, you should be kofer, you should go and deny the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'haneshama mema'enet. Now when the Satan tells him this, the Neshama refuses to listen. The Neshama is not interested. But still, as we all know, depending on who the person is, a person might end up giving in, just like a person gives in in this world, sometimes to the Satan. Over here, B'Shad Mitato, even though the Neshama has a strong stand, but in the end of the day, sometimes, Lo Aleinu, the Neshama might end up relinquishing to the goof, and he might end up falling into the things. Mai tekante. So he says, how can I get around this problem? He says a person at the time of his death should be mechaven to the 13 principles, which is what we're doing really. We did the first 12 and we're on the 13th right now, Tchiyat Meitim. So it's kedai to know them, the 13 principles in order to know. And he says, and if you don't know all 13 principles, you don't know them bal peh, or you don't understand, or you're not, sometimes at that time people are not up to thinking about the 13 principles, you have other things on your mind. So yikrem lefanav bano o bito. It's kedai for the person's son. It's kedai for the person's son or his daughter to read to him the 13 ikrim, or one of his beloved ones, his wife or whatever. V'hu yodeh behem v'tovlo. And he will be modeh. He will accept what is being told to him. V'tovlo, and then it will be good to him. These are the words of Rav Yehuda Meshari. He says that a person has to be worried at this time that he can mamish lead to a certain kfira, and because of this chashash, because of this fear, a person has to be careful to try to think of the Yud Gimel Ikrim. Now, I'll show you different eitzah soon, but it's a real event. Now, listen to this. Now, the Sefer, if you remember, I mentioned the first year, the Sefer Shevet HaMusar. Now, I stopped quoting it because people didn't like to hear the Sefer. They said, enough of this book. Right? Shevet HaMusar is Kadmon. Now, I actually said he was 100, I think, at the time, 100 years old. It's really 200 or 300 years old. So one of the first early Musar Sefer, and it's hardcore Musar. And they still sell it in stores. You should know, you could still get a hold of it. If not, it's two halakim. But it's very hard, and he speaks a lot about these inyanim of death. I quoted a lot of it in the first year, and I got a few people that didn't want to come back to this year anymore, so I finished quoting from him. Because he speaks Dugri, as they say. Now over here, he just speaks out this idea that I mentioned to you in Perek Chav Zayin. You can look it up. I told you there's one in Mas Mordechai. If you want, I haven't seen it in any other shul. Mas Mordechai. But it's kedai to look it up, or you can buy it. They said, I'm telling you, they just saw it in the stores recently. Basically, he said like this. He brings a story, after he brings this idea that we just mentioned, he brings the story of a kat of Bachurim. Now, these Bachurim were obviously married adults, because a few of them were actually wealthy people, or people of prominence, people of position, etc. But they were shkuyim, he says, be'averot. They were shakua in averot, in sins and doing improper things, etc. V'kofrim b'Torah, and they were kofer in the Torah. They did things they didn't believe in the Torah, or understood the different ways of being kofer b'Torah. I'm quoting to you almost word for word from him, basically. And he says, after a while, echad mehem, one of them got sick, very sick, choli shel mavet. They became goses, as they say. He was in a very difficult situation. He was on his deathbed. V'yom echad itchil b'tzaakot. He started screaming on his bed. Because he saw the Malach HaMavet sheshlufo cherev kenegdo. He was screaming ki'ilu at the Malach HaMavet that was in front of him, and he was screaming back at him, get me out of here, save me, right? He had his tzakot. And he was begging people, sheyatzilu oto mimeno. He was begging people, I'm quoting you word for word from him, by the way. He was begging people, save me from this Malach HaMavet is coming to get me. He was very scared. Now don't forget, this person was on a lower level, that's why you don't necessarily see it on the higher level people. He says, this is what the person said, the person said, the Malach HaMavet is coming to do to me what I did to my friends. He's coming to do. I don't know if he hurt his friends or what he did. He doesn't speak out exactly what he did. But he said the Malach HaMavet is coming to get me and is coming to do to me whatever I did to other people, and he's trying to hurt me the same way. A lot of people came to visit this person who was screaming like this. It could be because they were coming to visit him. It could be because it was also a nice sight to see. Right? It's an interesting sight. It is. Like when these things happen, it becomes very, all the kids like to look, what's going on. And they said he brings down because he was also a Gvir Yadua. Not only that, he was also a very known, prominent person of position. He was very, very wealthy, etc. That was A. And B, he says also because people wanted to see what he's saying when they were interested. So what did they do? What they did in a good shtot, what they always did, they invited the Rabbanim, they invited the big Dolei Ador, Chashav Rabbanim, to come and see what would be done. Again, there's a few hundred years ago, so we're talking about big Rabbanim. Huh?
It's happened over a number of days.
How long it took, he doesn't speak out. Why? Maybe, I don't know. A day or two? Yeah, he doesn't visit so long, right? It probably was a short experience. I wouldn't be surprised if it was things. But again, we're not talking about Los Angeles here. We're talking about a little moshav, like wherever. It wasn't traffic. They invite the Rabbanim. No, it's said what wasn't such a big deal. He's minu a Rabbanim lavo. They invited a few of the Rabbanim. Can you come and figure out what to do? So Rabbanim did what a good rabbi would do. He told him, quickly say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You should quickly say Shema Yisrael. That's what everyone is supposed to say. B'shat mitato. And he told him that they were telling him, be modeh, and then you'll be modeh to the emunah of Hashem and the Malach HaMavet to leave you alone. He won't be threatening you so much. If you're modeh too, because your whole life you're a kofar, you're being a kofar, you're denying the existence of Hashem, etc. So say Shema Yisrael. V'az yistalek mimcha. They promised him that would be. So he was quiet for a couple seconds. And then he answered, no, I'm not going to say it. I can't say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Can you believe the guy says, why not? What? Why can't he say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad? He says, because, listen to this, the Satan, again, there's a sefer from 200 or 300 years ago. It's not Stam Sipur Safta here. Yeah, the Satan said to me like this. He was thinking I was about to say Shema Yisrael. He says, because the Satan is saying, Omer, he says, if I do it, I'm going to get Dan Kashot. He's going to really whip me over the head heavy. He's going to smack me over the head, very heavy duty. If I say Shema Yisrael, the Satan's threatening me that if you do it, Yadinoti Kashot, I'm going to get it over the head. Vim lo yomar, and if I don't say Shema Yisrael, so he's going to help me mitzara choli. He's going to help me out from the tzar of the choli. He's going to get me out of this mess. The Satan says, don't say Shema Yisrael, and don't worry, I'll help you out if you don't say Shema. And if you do, then you will. The Rabbanim were begging him, hivtziru, that's his lashon. They were saying, don't listen to them, listen to us. We know what we're saying. We're the Rabbanim. He never listened to him his whole life, but said, just listen to us. Do what I'm saying. Say Shema Yisrael. Say Shema Yisrael. You're on your deathbed. You only have a few seconds left. Make the decision. Say Shema Yisrael. Do it. Hivtziru bo lishma lo. V'ulo shama, and he didn't say Shema. Instead, he started cursing them out. you stupid, etc., etc., right? He said, you guys just trying always to get me, always against us and this, you don't know what's good. I mean, he started being mecharv and got him. Sounds like he said some not such nice words. Ad sheyetza nishmato b'matzav hazu. Until his neshama went out in that thing. Anyone invite here to make a hesped for this guy, That's the problem. They always try to be, okay, now make a hesped for such a person, right? And until he died in this matzav. And he says in the Sefer over there, miyad, immediately the Rabbanim ran out of the room because they didn't want the tumah to cling onto them. They knew that there was a lot of tumah in the room right now, from the Satan and the Malach Mavis and this guy who was a Kofer Lagamri and all this. They said they immediately darted for the door to be able to make them their out. Kedei shelo yidabek behem atuma, in order to them. So if we hear from here a lot of lessons we learned from this story. First of all, we learned the Yesod that this Rav Yehuda Meshari brings in Megillat Starim, is that sometimes, I assume it happens more to Rashaim or people on lower levels, obviously, than Tzadikim, not just assume, that's what they say. But a person, Chas v'Shalom, can be coerced into being kofer into a Keneged HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In his last seconds, he could be coerced into going against the HaKadosh Baruch Hu because the Satan takes advantage, and that's his job. That's the Satan. Satan who Malach Mavis. They work together. It's the same person. Same person, just wearing different hats. Okay, so he's there to try to trick you into getting it, to do the wrong thing. That's A. And B, we also learn that there's a certain tum'ah that comes about in such a situation. You should stay away from it. Okay, by the death of a rasha or someone dying, it's not kedai to be around because there's a tumah that's enveloped by him because all the bad guys come to him, the klipot and the samal, the samech mem, I shouldn't say his name. And they prevent him from doing tshuva, and therefore it can be midabek on you, and therefore you have to be very careful from being in the vicinities of such a person. That you should know such a person. Okay, and unfortunately in this country, I think we do have a few people like this, if I could say. Okay, I'd say a handful. I'm not saying a lot, but there definitely are some people here, and everybody knows where they sit. If you want me to introduce you to them, I'll show you. Say again.
No, it's like the Satan is like koach from his success.
Yeah, it's a big success. Oh, look, it's his job. No, the HR. Why is he doing it? That's his avodah. Kodesh Baruch Hu put him here for a reason.
This is a pretty galui success story.
Yeah, success story. But again, okay, I don't know if we have stories like this, Mamish, but again, this is from 250 years ago, in the 1700s that was running.
It would also need some kind of spiritual connection, even if the spiritual connection has gone off. To be almost zocher to have such experience. If someone has no shaykhs to spirituality at all, they probably wouldn't have.
That's what I meant. I mean, he was in a door that was on very high levels. The Doilim were flying around, and it was in time of the Goyen. I'm saying it was a big generation. So I assume also the Zeh Keneged Zeh, when you have such a high level, you also have such a low level, and therefore you're right. So it has such a thing. That's true. Right, it's the same thing, like black magic. Why was Kishuv so powerful in Mitzrayim? Because at that time you had Nevuah, you had the koch of Kedusha. So that's why you had that. Because of this idea that we're mentioning, so the Kadmonim were metaken a moda'ah. A moda'ah is a what? Announcement? Kind of like an announcement, a hachrazah, announcement, something like that. You make a moda'ah, acknowledgement. I'm trying to think of the right word. Yeah, you make a pre something, like just make you sign a contract or something. You say something beforehand that you write when a person's alive. That if chas v'shalom, after I tell you, you'll tell me the English word. If chas v'shalom I'm moide to anything that the mesit tells me mishad mitatoi, I have nothing to sue. It's kecheres anishbor, just like you say on kol nidre, right? Or that's when you make hatarat nedarim. Hatarat klalat is not only on the past, but you also say anything that I will do in the future for this whole entire year. It's kecheres anishbor. It has no tkifut. I don't want it. Ve'ein bo mamish. So you make a declaration such as this in order to say that anything that I will say, if chas v'shalom I will admit to the Satan's kitrug, it will be kecheres anishbor, ein ve'ein bo mamish. Ubiyachad im zot, and at the same time you're mitcharet on all your aveirot that you might have done from when you're little, and anything that Yom Kippur was not metzliach to erase. Okay, even though sometimes Yom Kippur can't get all of them, as we all know, depending on how serious the aveira was. And there you will have a tshuva shlema sheyom amitahu ve'apachad, and that will cause you to think. Like the Gemara in Brachot says, Yom Amita gorem sheyashuv. Because of the Yom Amita, you end up having a certain tshuva, and you make this declaration to kilu say that whatever I say is not necessarily acknowledged. Don't acknowledge anything. And they bring also in the Korot, now based on this, in the Shevet Musar also, it brings in the Korot of Turkey, meaning in Turkey, in the log that they have over there, if you look in the log over there, I don't know where it exists now anymore, it says till Tafresh Sadi Dalid, until the date of Tafresh Sadi Dalid, which comes out 1934. Until that date, there was a solid minhag that they always said until that year that they were noig to read in the Beit HaKnesset this piece that I just read to you from Shevet HaMusar. This whole entire piece that I just told you today in Shir, they would read this piece in Shevet HaMusar every Sheni v'Chamishi before the Rosh Chodesh, meaning if Rosh Chodesh was on the second half of the week, then they would read it on Thursday. If Rosh Chodesh was on the first half of the week, they would read it on the Monday before. They would always read it on the previous Monday or Thursday that was followed by Rosh Chodesh, in order to remind people to do this, just to be able to, because the person, as we know, never knows. You never know when the day is going to come. Some of us that are older are more worried than some of us that are younger, but it doesn't make a difference. And therefore, he says that was the minhag that they always did. The minhag stopped, and besides the fact there's no Jews living there anymore. That's the announcement that they would do. And then he brings also from the Tzavav Naftali Katz. He wrote a sefer Smichat Chachamim. He was a big Talmid Chacham. That he himself had a minhag to say it at least once a week, or sometimes once a month, or once a year. He would always be makbid. But even though he always said it, he went and he would make this moda'ah. He made this moda'ah before Zman Mitah. Before he died also, he was very makbid. He obviously knew it by heart because he said it very often. And therefore, he brings down from here that there's an inyan to be very makbid on making this hoda'ah. That's what I was telling you. It's halacha l'maisa this. Okay, and as we know, there was a maisa here in Rabbi Genish. You were there, no? Do you know? There's a person here that I went to. I only know one person here who did it, but he knew he was dying of cancer. It was a neighbor of mine, Natan Sher, whoever might have known him. It was how long ago? 7, 8 years ago? 6, 7 years ago? You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, I remember that he did it. He had a cornfield there, and he had a few other Talmidei Chachamim there, and me, and there were 10 people that were there, and he made this moda'ah in front of them because he knew that he didn't have very much long to live. Unfortunately, he had the machala, and he did it on purpose. So he was a tzaddik anyways, but he still did it. But apparently, I'm just trying to show that there was something to it. Now, there's Stava Machloket. I'm just bringing parenthetically while I'm bringing this. There's a Machloket about this. Rav Dublitsky, who just was nifter about 6 months ago, he was a massive Talmid Chacham. In Pshat and Sod, he has Sfarim also in a lot of Kabbalah, but he also has a lot of Sfarim in Pshat. One of the only people like that, and since Ben Ish Chai, in my opinion, I've never seen anything like it. He holds that if a person dies immediately, over here it's an advantage, meaning chas v'shalom, a person's in a car accident, or he dies because of some tragic incident, gets killed, etc. He says that in such a situation, since the person dies immediately, the Satan doesn't have an opportunity to take him. It only is referring to someone who's chas v'shalom on his deathbed and taking time. That's the only time that it can happen, like the story I just said to you. Now he brings from the Chida, there's just a piece of information, interesting. He brings from the Chida, Nitzutzei Oroto Lazor, that's the Chida. He says that even, the Chida says there's no such thing as someone dying immediately. Even if he dies, I have to check, I have to check the Metziut here. He says even if he dies, he really kind of mitalef, he kind of fades. He faints, he sees what we just spoke about, the Satan, and the many of the other things I just spoke about, and only after that he dies lagamri. Now there is definitely a very solid amount of truth to that, because we just saw a lot of videos of people who were dead for quite a long time, and they were able to come back and they saw everything we spoke about until now. So there is definitely a lot of things now. Medically speaking, every medical doctor will say, what are you talking about? The guy's dead, he's dead. It's a flat line and there's no pulse, the heart is not thing, the brain is not dead, so nothing's active. But he says, no, that's not exactly true. He's not fully dead. He still has some activation, meaning he's still able to see what we saw, the Shechina, or the corridors, or the or the Krovei Mishpacha, or the Satan that we just mentioned. And therefore, according to the Chida, it would seem to be that even in an immediate death, something like this could happen. But Dublitsky says, what are you talking about? That can't be, that's true. Because if a person is kofer en HaKadosh Baruch Hu after he's officially dead, So, you can't throw the book at him. The guy's innocent. He was okay. It can only happen when he's still on his last legs, when he's in his last few seconds, and he still has a small midah of bechira, a very small, tiny, minute amount of bechira, and he still has some chiyut, some life to him, then he can do it. So even if you want to tell me there are some events that happen after a person is almost dead, or he's still in that vicinity of death, but he's already there, so then the time is that does not work. The Satan is not able to get him there, and it only works in the situation which I mentioned. Okay, so this is a neat piece of information, which I have a feeling no one heard this in another shir, so that's why I kind of spread it over. But it's also nogea la'alacha. Chas v'shalom, it shouldn't be nogea, but it's nogea to know that it's something that in the olden days people used to do this all the time. Nowadays we don't live with these types of thoughts. When you speak about death, people usually don't want to come to the shir, so therefore it's not spoken about. But it's kedai to know that. Okay. That's the idea of the moda. Do you want to know about the moda? It's kedai to do it. Yeah, it's kedai to do it. At least once. Huh?
Anytime?
Like I said, I would have said yes, and when a person's or terminally or before. But it sounds like from here, even without that, that if a person, that their minhag was to do it before every Rosh Chodesh, or this Rav Naftali Katz, you should do it at least once a year or once a month. He used to do it quite often. So the minhag was to do it a lot. The minhag is obviously not to do it nowadays so often, but at least it's kedai to know it, to be ready, and not just for you. If chas v'shalom you have a krovei mishpacha, if you have a family member that might need to know these things, it's very kedai to know. Okay.
Is it printed somewhere besides the sefer?
This whole ma'aseh I haven't seen printed anywhere, but the moda'ah itself I can try to get a hold of. I've had a feeling something there. I think in the shla over there he brings it. Okay, I could look it up. Wait a minute. Okay, I know I was going to try to do it. If you want bli neder, I'll try to get a hold of it. I actually thought about it when I last week that I was going to try to get a hold of it, but I was a little bit busy this week, so I didn't get a chance. Okay, bli neder.
Why is it enough to just say once in your life?
You're right. First of all, we say pam b'shana. When we say kol nidrei, and that we say it every year. Mechachim is it. Because very mitchachim every year is a new Rosh Hashanah. Every time is a new thing, a new person, a new thing. You don't take it back. B'karan, it should be enough to say it once. That's the truth. Rishmi ani mevin otcha, but you never know if you might have said this or said that or change your mind or I don't know what. But I understand what you're saying. He's saying only once should be enough. What?
It's in the cold
we say we're matir everything that we did, and from now and from what we're about to do, anything we will do. But we also do it at Torah Nedarim. We do it.
What we're saying is slightly different.
You do it also, right? You do also in the past and also the future, right?
No, but
Svardim for sure do it.
No, but isn't what we're saying now? It's not the same. It's slightly different.
But it's also in the future.
It's the same. All I mean is the idea of the future. That you say whatever I'm about to say, it should be kicheres and nishbar. I'm not mitchaches to it. Don't it's kilu now. Now a lot of the Rishonim don't agree. You can't do that. If you make a neder because you said before don't count it, a lot of Rishonim say that doesn't work. There's a Tosfot in the Darm Chafalef that says it doesn't work so well. But it works on certain hanhagot, which I'm not getting into the sugya now, obviously. But the idea is that it works to a certain extent that you show that I don't mitchaches to it. Never be mitchaches to it. A person can't say don't mitchaches to any ma'averot and go be do whatever he wants, right? So that's why it's important to say it again and again. That's what I'm saying. Okay, al kopanim. That's ze ma sheyatza mi adavar hazeh. It's an interesting ha'ara to know. Okay. Now, I'll mention two quick small points before I mention a whole different thing. The Zohar brings a parsha Truma that someone who dies, listen to this plug, it's advertising for Eretz Yisrael, someone who dies in Eretz Yisrael, so he does not die al yidei malach hamavet atzmo, meaning I think he's protected. I think the idea about it is that you're protected a little bit to a certain extent of what I've just spoken about. Okay, but the Malach HaMavet himself, Mamash, doesn't come. Malach Gavriel comes, who's a Malach Shorachim, and he helps the guy out. Now, if it works with everyone or not, like I told you, there's some people in this country that I'm not sure if they're protected from this. But Al Kapanim, dying in Eretz Yisrael, the actual death in Eretz Yisrael, not being buried in Eretz Yisrael, the death in Eretz Yisrael comes through Malach Gavriel, because as we all know, you have a direct kesher with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So I just wanted to give an advertisement for everyone here who's being most nefesh to live in this country, that it's a certain advantage. Okay? And that's why they bring from the Gemara in Shabbat that we all know David HaMelech died Ayidei Malach, even though he was and since he was in Eretz Yisrael, he died through the Malach of Gavriel. Rav Chaim Falaji from the middle 1800s, the big Sephardi Poseki with the Kaf HaChaim and others for him. He brings from the Zohar that a segula to be protected from the Malach HaMavet, or similar to what I was just saying before, is from saying Pitom Aktoret, what Sephardim like to say a lot. They do it based on the Rav Chaim Velaji. We say Pitom Aktoret, we do it anyways, but we say Pitom Aktoret, and therefore you die Malach Rachamim. Sometimes we say Pitom Aktoret with this klaf, that's why it's up on the wall here. There's a mile of saying it from the klaf because it helps for this segula. Okay, to be able to do it, you see it straight from the things. There's a mile of saying it with the klaf. Does he say it? No, he doesn't say it. I just know there is a segula of saying it with the klaf. In this piece, he doesn't say it.
I thought with David the Melech, the Malach Mavis distracted him.
The Malach Mavis couldn't get to him, so he played the game, and then he did. So that was his question. David the Melech, they couldn't get him because he was always Shogar B'Torah on his lips every second, and they can only get him on Shabbat because he was told he was going to die in Shabbat. So the Malach HaRabbi rattled some leaves, and then he was nifter. So that's what he asked. So it seems like the Malach HaRabbi, no, the Malach HaRabbi just rattled the leaves, and the Malach HaGavriel came and took him. He finished off. But okay, they worked teamwork, tag team. Okay, I'll call upon him. That's it. Okay, that's the first half of what I wanted to speak about today. The second half of the other, which is also relevant, before we move on to the next shlav. After this, the next shlav is going to be what happens after death. Kilu, some inyanim about after death. One last thing I want to say is, right now we're in the Shas Mita, while during the death. Okay? Is a Gemara in Ktuvot. The Gemara in Ktuvot in Daf Kuf Gimel, over there when it's speaking about Rabbeinu Kodesh, and it's also brought in of Avot de Rav Natan, in Perek Kafei, brings a number of things that there are some simanim tovim for a person who dies, and there's some simanim lo tovim. Okay, you can know when it's a siman tov or not a siman tov. Pay attention to when it's a siman tov, when it's a siman lo tov. Don't start saying, "Oh, this guy was like this guy was like this." Okay, we don't become judgmental for people, but at least to know when there's a siman tov. The Gemara brings a number of things of what's considered a siman sheyafelo. Okay, so first of all, the first thing the Gemara says is when a person dies almost besimcha. Okay, a happiness, a reguaness, a thing, as opposed to a tiruf adat. A tiruf adat is when he's mebubal. That's a siman ra, as opposed to when he dies with a certain menucha, when he dies with a certain menucha, a relaxation, etc. Because the number of reasons given over there in the Marsha, the Ben Yoyada, is the Ben Ish Chai, they say because a tzaddik sees what's coming for him. He's coming, so it's exciting, it's very good. He has a certain simcha, and he sees what's ahead for him. And Mamela, he has a certain appeasement. He has a certain menuchat nefesh. Okay, that's a certain thing that he has. I will mention parenthetically, and I was going to say the share is Leila Nishma. My father-in-law, Zalman Leib ben Shimon. You should know when he was niftar, they were actually amazed. People didn't even realize that he passed away. He was not passed away. He was more or less still cognitive to a certain extent, and he still had some. He was able to respond. He was able to respond through shaking or whatever, and this and that. Like my wife was able to speak to him the last 3 minutes before he was niftar. Even he shook his head that he was speaking to her. She wanted to make sure, Baruch Hashem, which was very important. But even after that, a few people were still talking to him, and they didn't even realize that he was already had passed away. So I mentioned to my wife, or whatever. It's a very siman tov. It's a very siman tov. It's almost like a mitat neshika, which is what we mentioned, that when a person is on a high darga, and in my opinion he was on a very high darga, that the goof is not an interference to the neshama. The neshama finds its way easily to going upstairs, upstairs, because there's no interference, there's no mechitzot, right? There's no differences, which is what we mentioned. It's like a thread of hair that comes out of milk. It's just soothing in this. I don't know if it's exactly this case over here. I don't know what I'm going to say. We're talking about Tzaddikim Gemurim. That's Mita Neshika was given to Aaron and Moshe. Whoever is Mita Neshika, Kadosh Baruch Hu decides. But there's a big difference between when a person who is a Rosh, and that's what it means, we talk Tiruf Adat, that he has a very difficult time, the Neshama has a very difficult time leaving. He has a much more difficult time leaving, because he's so encumbered and so surrounded by his physical body, that he comes out like thorns in fleece, in a tzemer, in fleece, that you pick one, and some part comes out, it's much more painful. That's the first Gemara that says the difference between Tiruf and Menucha and Simcha. Yeah.
And that's apparent on the face or something like that?
Now again, don't always look at the bad side, because we're not to be judgmental. We never know what the cheshbon or shemaim are, but I'm just pointing it out for the good side, at least to see. And do you see it on the face to a certain extent? Like, I think the example I just gave was very apparent. Like, I mean, I'm talking about people who were there. I wasn't there, obviously, but people who were there. The mamish said, like, they didn't even realize it just kind of went, and it was with a, it just flew. It just
it could be otherwise.
came in a very
nice. What would be evidence?
Oh, you could see that's a lot of times it happens. No, the person's getting very rickety in this, very upset and very frustrated, or very not being mistood there. Sometimes, like what about the case I said before, you guys sometimes scream, and there are people that scream. I don't know if it's exactly like that, but people are very violent or incongruous. Okay. Waxman always says a story. He tries to speak about the importance of mita zman mita. I don't know exactly what the shir was about. I don't remember. But he says a true story of someone who was the town Scrooge. You know, the town Scrooge, there's always one of those. He was, and he hated kids. He hated children. He hated them. Kids never went up to him. He was a wealthy guy, but he was all Scrooge, one of these with the face, right? And all the kids never went next to him. And when he was on his deathbed, so, I don't know if the kids were excited or they wanted to see, or they wanted to make sure that he dies, to make sure he's finished, they wanted to finish up. So it says that he was on his death, and there was 5, 6, 7 kids looking through the window. They crawled up like this window over here. They're looking over the window. They're looking over to see. There was a few men around, and they wanted to see what was going on. So the guy who was on his deathbed saw the kids looking over the window, and he said, "Hey kids, get down from that window right now!" He started screaming at them at the top of his lungs. "V'kach yatsa nishmato," and that's how he died. And when you hear such things, you're like, when I heard that, it really is a mess. He was talking about, I think, anger. That's what it was. I'm pretty sure. Like when we speak about don't be angry, don't scream. Okay, I'll try. But when you hear that, it's like, that's ridiculous. I mean, the guy's dead. Like, well, what do you scream? What does that help? Now they're still in the window. Like he's dead. What did you get out of that? But that's really what happens when a person gets angry.
There was some people all they live for.
Right, that was their life. They were excited to get angry.
Life is the fight. Life is the anger. There isn't anything to
So you're saying he was happy to die? I'm saying there was a certain passion that a person has for doing that. Yeah, he was doing what he's doing.
Some people,
you got to let him.
The people who are distressed at the time of death, they can be I would say they can be very special people. That they see that they have some elements of unfinished business or charata over certain things they did or didn't do, and it's because they're actually on a high daraga that they have this sensitivity. They weren't perfect. But they're Torah that they're about to pass.
So they try to close circles. Try to close.
The person doesn't feel they were successful, and they're on a high spiritual level, but they're tremendously disturbed that they couldn't make a right wrong or say the right thing. They did the wrong thing.
Okay.
And they're in turmoil, but not because they were Rosh Hashanah, because to the contrary, they were not quite perfect.
Not quite perfect, so they wanted to fix themselves up. In that case, I agree. I don't know if this case was the same, but yeah, you're right. I hear what you're saying. Next, he brings, if a person dies, mitoch divrei Torah, or dvar mitzvah, or dibur, or mitoch simcha, okay, all these types of things, which I just mentioned, calls this simin yafela. Divrei Torah, etc., dvar mitzvah, a person's trying to do his best to do whatever he can do, as opposed to a person who dies in the opposites of all these things, okay? Derech batala, or derech hatzvut, he's very depressed, or all these types of things. Now the Gemara says, what do you mean, if a person's upset, you're saying it's bad. So the Gemara brings the Rabbeinu Kodesh cried when he was dying. Rabbeinu Kodesh was crying when he was dying. He was very upset about it. They said he raised his hands and he was crying. You never knew I was there. He was crying at the time. So it sounds like a person who was dying. And Rabbeinu Kodesh, Kodesh Yosem Mizeh, he was Rabbeinu. And we all know the story with the Gon. The Gon at the time, the Gon who came out never cried his whole life. But at the time when he was dying, he held his tzitzis in his hand, the famous Maisa, and he said with a few prutas, with a few zuzim, with a little bit of a few pennies, the person's able to be mekayim every mitzvah every single second, and he was crying on his deathbed before he was niftar. Now he's going into the next world where he's not going to be able to have such opportunity. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean that mitoch atzvut, mitoch depression is bad? It seems like it's all right. So the Gemara answers what you probably are thinking yourself. The obvious answer is that if you're upset about death, the actual fact that he's dying or this and that, so maybe that's a bad sign. But if he's upset about the fact that he's losing his mitzvot, which is what all these gdolim are crying about, so then it's 100% beseder. That's a davar tov. That's obviously siman tov because they were upset about what they are leaving. The Gemara in Brachot, Chav Zayin, Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, with all his talmidim around him, and he said he was crying on the bed, and they said, "What are you crying about? You're okay." He says, "I don't know what olam I'm going to. I'm not sure what olam I'm going to. Where are they taking me? Am I sure I'm going to be okay? Did I do enough mitzvot? I'm not sure if I finished. If I finish my job here, maybe similar to what you were just talking about." If I finished the amount of mitzvot I was, if I did, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, who the Gemara says, who even sichot to open, he knew everything. Kol Torah kula mamish from tchila v'ad sof. Al kopanim, that's that idea, that if a person does it for those reasons, so it's considered okay. Okay, the Gemara brings that type of list. Now the Gemara brings a couple lists of a good time to die. Now I don't recommend doing it lechatchila, okay? Don't get yourself in this situation. But if it comes up, then, try to push for these days, okay? Okay, now, Erev Shabbat, the Gemara says if a person is nifter on Erev Shabbat, simin yofelo. Okay, it's a simin yofelo. Shenichnas yashar lemenucha. Because he goes straight into menucha. As we all know, the 6 days of the week is Yom Chol. That's considered Olam Hazeh. Shabbat is Me'ein Olam Haba. So if a person dies Erev Shabbat, going straight into Shabbat, so it's Me'ein Olam Haba, he goes straight into Shabbat. Okay, that's that. In addition, in addition, the Shita Mekubetzes bring there, he's nitzel michibut hakever. Since he goes straight into Shabbat, someone mentioned here, I mentioned chibut hakever, I don't remember who, but you saved from chibut hakever, which we mentioned takes a week or sometimes a little bit more than that. It could be the chibut hakever you get saved from if the person dies on Erev Shabbat. What'd you say?
It means he's not going to be buried there till after Shabbos. So why is that?
That's why we try to bury him on Erev Shabbos. Yeah, I think the idea here to be saved from the chibut hakever is only if he's buried on Erev Shabbat. Someone mentioned it here once. I forgot who it was, but the idea that you get saved from chibut hakever, that's what happened. There's a big tzaddik who was, in the Har Nof thing. A friend of my wife's, her husband was one of the 4 people who was nifter now. It's 5. You know what I'm talking about? In the Har Nof incidents 3 years ago. Aryeh Kapinski, who was at our bar mitzvahs, he came here very, very often. He did it more than one. He was a Baal Chesed Shein Kamo, Mamash Shein Kamo, how much Chesed the guy used to do. I mean, most people have gamachs for let's say a stroller or, for maybe, small things. He had a gamach for Frigidaires. And he carried them himself. And he didn't have a car. I'm being very honest with you. And in Har Nof, if anyone knows what Har Nof is, it's a mountain. Up and downstairs. I'm serious, he used to literally deliver it to people's doors to do it. But Bekitzer, he used to try to be makpeh to tell people who are nifter. I know a few times that people who are nifter on Friday morning or this to try to speed up the burial so that they can get this kfur on Erev Shabbos in order to be nitzel mi chibut hakever. Okay, there's a person who died b'kedusha. Talking about a person who died b'tzarech mitzvah. The people was meitim in Har Nof. That's what happened. Someone asked me? No. You asked me? No. Okay. Al kopanim. That's right. The Yara Dvash, which is not Rav Yaakov Emden, Rav Yonas and Eibeshitz, says that Mi Shemed Be'ityo Shel Nachash. He brings a different shot. Since we know that the Gemara says someone who dies Be'ityo Shel Nachash, meaning that he only died because of the sin. There were 4 people that never sinned in their life, and they only died because there's a gzera of death upon every person. Okay, that's what we know. There's 4 people. So the person who dies also on Erev Shabbat, it's a sign, it's a siman that he only died because of the chet of Adam HaRishon, which was on Erev Shabbat. That's what he says. It was on the Cherev HaNesh, so it's a sign that the person was more or less a clean person. That's his pshat. Now the Gemara does say the opposite though, and again, don't be judgmental, but it's because I don't know, the Gemara does say, but a person who dies on Motzei Shabbat is not a siman tov. That's not such a positive siman, that's not good. Another time which the Gemara brings down is someone who dies on Yom Kippur, or Erev Yom Kippur. If a person dies on Erev Yom Kippur, so that's a siman ra. That's not a good siman because it's right before Yom Kippur. You've got 364 days or 354 days of chatayim racked up upon him. So that's not so good, as opposed to a person who dies on Motzei Yom Kippur, Ein Kamo, that's the best. Okay? That's Ein Olam Haba. Okay? It's very kedai to make sure, what? It is Olam Haba, right? It's straight Olam Haba, that's why I said it, yeah. But a person, it's a siman yafelo, shekibel mechila, immediately there, you're going upstairs with a clean slate, as the Gemara says. Now the Yalkut brings down also, so the Mefarshim, the Rishonim ask that we know, based on the Yalkut, that Rabbi Akiva HaKadosh, Rabbi Akiva, died when? On Erev Yom Kippur. He died on Erev Yom Kippur. He was niftar on Erev Yom Kippur. So the Rishonim already ask, well, 1 second, he died Erev Yom Kippur. That doesn't make sense. So how does that work? So they bring a teretz based, the Iyun Yaakov brings this in Ketuvot and the Gemara over there. The Iyun Yaakov is, and the Ein Yaakov, as we know, and the other Mefarshim, they say that we have a Kabbalah. There was a Kabbalah that Misha Tamid Chozer B'Tshuva Ki Rabbi Akiva Nechshav Avura Tamid L'Motzei Yom Kippur. Rabbi Akiva was always living Motzei Yom Kippur, after Yom Kippur. Every day would be Chozer and a Tshuva Shlema. He was a Tzaddik Gomer, and he was always no nafkamina for him between, there's no difference for him whether it's before Yom Kippur or after Yom Kippur. For him, every day is after Yom Kippur. That's one of the Terutzim, and also the Chatam Sofer brings us in a Tshuva, and Yeridei Siman Shin Lamed Zayin. Dibur Maschal Omnam, if someone wants to look it up. But Al Kapanim, that's, I do it because just in case anyone's listening. But Al Kapanim, that's what comes out with Rabbi Akiva, that they say he was in constant Tshuva. That's what the Mefarshim answer. I had my own answer. I think it's a very straightforward answer. I don't know if it's, you could say, it goes very well with the Orach Chaim, but Rabbi Akiva didn't die voluntarily, he was killed. He was one of the Asura who were gay, Malchut. He was one of the people that were killed. Okay, so they decided to kill him on Erev Yom Kippur. I don't know if that's a Siman Ra for a person also. When a person dies somewhat naturally, or, to a certain extent naturally, then you could say Siman Ra before, Siman Tov afterwards, because, Kadosh Baruch Hu is showing him a bad sign, let's say. But if a person was killed by some goy that decided to kill him and happened to be on Erev Yom Kippur, I'm not sure if that would be considered a Siman Ra. Okay, now I'm not going to get into this, but this depends a little bit on the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. The Orach Chaim says that a person with his free choice can change a gzeira on a person when he was supposed to die. As we know, it's actually in this week's Parsha. It's coming in this week's Parsha. I just thought about it, right? That a person can change. That's what happened with Reuven when he was thrown into the bor. That's why Reuven decided to put Yosef into the bor, because he preferred that he should not be underneath the hands of people. He preferred that he be he preferred he be by scorpions, because scorpions can't kill him if Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't say. But a person can kill him if a person really wants to, and there's such a thing as overriding the thing. Now that's a machloket. Again, I'm not getting into that whole discussion right now. It's not for now. But based on that, could be another reason why Rabbi Akiva was killed on Erev Yom Kippur.
Isn't there one more obvious answer?
Go ahead.
The first answer was that he sinned and he did tshuva every day. Why do we just say that he just didn't sin?
He didn't sin at all? I mean, he didn't die b'yotzei shel dachash. He wasn't one of the four people, but he was a very pure person, I agree. Yeah, okay. I'm saying he wasn't a perfect person. He wasn't one of the four. He wasn't Kalev, he wasn't Yishai, he wasn't this. What?
He was Erev Yom Kippur, Erev Shabbos.
Erev Yom Kippur, Erev Shabbos.
Ultimate.
Then I don't know, yeah. You have to figure out the math. I'll tell you the date he died and you figure it out. You'll Google it or whatever that thing is. Anyway, so that's that. And two more quick times, and with that we're coming to a close here basically. The Zohar brings down Parshat Yitro that someone who dies on Shabbat Kodesh, especially Bizman Mincha, Ein Sholtim Bo Adinim B'Shat Mitoto. It's a good thing. Ki az Et Ratzon Gadol. It's a big Et Ratzon. If a person dies during that time period, it's an Et Ratzon, and therefore, in Shabbat, and especially by Mincha, meaning Klizin, and as we all know, two big people were niftar at that time, Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech, which is happening tonight. Every Friday, every Motzei Shabbat, they do in Kever David, if whoever wants to go, by the way, tonight, they would do in Kever David, they do Chagiga, because that was the time, Keb Yochel, that David HaMelech was niftar, at that time. Okay, so Hashem got him dafka, the Malach HaMelech got him dafka in a time which was in Eitrat. So one last time is brought down also, and it's brought down in Halachan, Taf Tzadi Gimel. Okay, Taf Tzadi Gimel is the place in Sfirat HaOmer. During the time between Atzeret and Shvuot, which a number of people die because it's a long period of time, is not such a good time to be niftar. So try to hold out, Chavra. Okay? It's Mishpat Rishayim Gehenim Ladat Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because the Gemara, there's a Mishnah Ediot that brings down that during that time, there's a Mishnah Ediot that brings that there are few things that are 12 months. It brings a few things that are 12 months. And one of them is Gehenim, is 12 months, and the person sits Veilut for 12 months. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri over there says also that Mishpat Rishayim Gehenim is between the Zmanim of Pesach Le'atzeret. During those 49 days, it's considered a bad Zman. Now, I know the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva were niftar in that time, and that's why there seems to be a machloket in the Rishonim over there. But Al Kapanim, according to the Shita, you should know that it's considered not such a good time. Maybe they were punished or whatever, so it was not a good time. But Al Kapanim, that was considered something not good. One last thing. Rashi in Sukkah and Daf Nun Gimel brings that it's nigzar on a person where he's going to die, the place he's going to die, the area that he's going to die. You hear that? Just like it says, just like when a person's born, he's decided which parents he's going to be born to, and how much chokhmah he's going to have, and many, many things are decided about the person. Not your free choice, your self-free choice, but many nitunim, even where you're going to live is already, the Gemara says, even where you're going to live is officially. Before, so too, the place that he's going to be, he's going to die is also decided. Regluni, Reglaim de bar inish arevim le, le'ata de mitvei, Taman movilin yate. Wherever he goes, that's where he's going to end up being. And ki'ilu, you end up being in the place that was destined for you to be. And the Malach HaMavet is going to get you in that spot that you were supposed to die. So they ask a kasha from the Gemara in Mod Katan. The Gemara in Mod Katan Chavchet brings Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet, it was time for him to go. HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided Malach HaMavet it's time to go. So he was walking in the shuk, and the Malach HaMavet came into Rav Sheshet and said, guess what? It's time to go. We got to go. Rav Sheshet told him, Slicha, wait, a little bit of patience. I'm busy with my kniyot here. What are you doing? I said, wait till I get home and we'll talk. Right? And he said, we'll wait. That's what the Gemara says. He said, we'll wait until afterwards. They didn't let him take him there. He waited till he got home. I'm surprised he went home. I'm not sure exactly why. But he went home, and over there the Malach HaMavet took him. And then the Malach HaMavet took Rav Sheshet. And these people had a sicha with the Malach HaMavet. It's unbelievable. So over there, so everyone asked, 1 second. The Malach HaMavet decided the shuk, it's in the shuk. You can't make up your own, I don't think it's such a kasha, because I think tzaddikim are different in my opinion. But so they paskin, I'll pee this, they make a halacha. The Rishonim paskin halacha, that doesn't have to be dafk in one area, it has to be in the sviva. It has to be in Ramat Beit Shemesh, let's say, or it has to be in the area, or it has to be in England, or whatever it is, right? It has to be in a certain area, London, it has to be in one specific city, or that type of area, that's right. It doesn't have to be dafka in, I'm going to say, in wherever, somewhere else, right? It doesn't have to be in one specific Dalit Amot. In the Sviva is enough. They actually bring this lahalacha in order to do this. Just give me 1 second. And also, who did Lagabi the Makam of Kvura? The Adam Rishon was taken from all 4 corners of the world because the body has the capability of returning to that specific spot which he is supposed to return to. Everybody has their Makam Kfur which is allotted for them. You might have to pay for it, but Lamaisa you still have the Makam and big bucks if it wants to be in Eretz Yisrael. But Al-Kapadim, you have that Makam of Kvura that is allotted to you in that specific spot that you're supposed to do, just like was given by Adam Rishon. So you should know the place that a person dies and the place that Teitze Rucha Yashuv le'admato. That's what they darshan. That's a lashon in Tehillim. He comes out when he Teitze Rucha Yashuv le'admato le'adama shelo. A person goes back to exactly the same spot where he is supposed to die. I'm sorry, what did you say?
What would be the reason behind a certain place? He has to be lifted in that place.
What's the reason why specifically in that place? Yeah.
Maybe inside.
Okay. I'm more or less finished. Why is it be dafka in a specific place? Because just like everything, the place where you're living is also allotted to you from Shemayim. It has to be a certain thing. The Kadosh Baruch Hu gives you certain scenarios where you're supposed to be in, you're supposed to go. You know what I'm saying? Like it's Mishkafayim, no one does. Everyone stays alive there. It's a place of no mita. Okay, I had 2 more small points, but it's already 8:20. I think we're going to stop here. Next time we're going to move on to the next shlav of mita, which is what happens by preidat neshama, when the neshama is actually leaving the goof. Certain things that occur during that time period, and then we'll speak about a couple more other inyanim that a person's supposed to know, and then eventually, in 2 or 3 shurim, I might start getting to Ganim and Gan Eden, which is what happens in the next stage, obviously. Okay, say it on.